Hey friends, quick thing before we start. For those of you who don't know, I've spent the past few years writing this book, and the good news is that it's finally released. It's called Lessons from a Terrible Photographer, and I want to try out a pitch on you guys. You're the first ones to hear it. I've been working on it for a few weeks, and here's my pitch. Influencers talk about cameras. This book, however, is about the things that cameras can't fix. You like that? Because the war is internal, and it's not technical. I'm so proud of that. The war is internal and not technical. Now, because I absolutely have no self-control when it comes to packaging, I'm a big design nerd. The launch is actually limited to a collector's box. It includes the book, which is signed and numbered. It has a signed print from me, a field notes notebook, and a hand-typed letter from me on my 1920s Corona typewriter. It's pretty cool. And there's actually much more swag in there too. It's a literal artifact. It's also $69.99. And I know that feels weird to say out loud, but printing costs apparently are absolutely insane. And I wanted this to be really special. So there are only 35 of these in existence, probably a lot less now. So if you want one, the link is in the show notes. And if that price sounds a little crazy to you, I get it. I totally get it. The standard hardback comes out in January, available for pre-order. Okay, on with today's episode. In January of 2007, a man walked into a subway station in Washington, D.C. during the morning rush hour. He's wearing jeans, a long-sleeve t-shirt, and a Washington Nationals baseball cap. He found a spot near a trash can, opened his violin case, and began to play. He played 6 Bach pieces, and he played for straight 45 minutes. And in that time, thousands of people walked past him. That man was Joshua Bell, one of the best violinists in the world. And he wasn't playing some cheap fiddle from a pawn shop. He was playing a Stradivarius worth $3.5 million. And 3 days earlier, he had sold out a theater in Boston where seats cost over $100 a piece. But in that subway station, almost no one stopped. Only 7 people paused to listen for more than a minute. He made a whopping $32 in change. And when he finished playing, there was no applause, there was no recognition, there was just the sound of shoes on tile and the rumble of trains arriving. And Joshua Bell was completely visible. Thousands of people looked straight at him. They saw the man. They heard the music objectively. They heard it. The sound waves hit their eardrums. But they didn't see him, and they didn't hear him. He was a genius holding a masterpiece, standing in a subway station. But because he didn't have a witness, because no one stopped to recognize what they were experiencing, he was just background noise. He was just a guy in a baseball cap next to a trash can playing a violin. I've been thinking about that story a lot lately because I think a lot of us feel like Joshua Bell sometimes. We're playing our hearts out. We're holding the expensive gear. We're doing the work. We are showing up. We are creating. We're pouring everything we have into our craft, but we feel like we're playing to an empty room. We feel like we're disappearing into the noise. And you can be the best in the world. You can be holding a Stradivarius. You can be playing Bach perfectly. But if you're on the wrong stage or on no stage at all, you might as well be invisible. My name is Patrick Fuller, and this is the Terrible Photographer podcast, where we have honest conversations about creativity, identity, and discovering your voice. Today is episode 40, guys. Holy shit. We've made it to the 40s. And this is actually the first in a 4-part series I'm calling The Long Middle. Now, when I say the long middle, I'm talking about that specific season in a creative life where you've mastered the skills, you've built the business, you've done everything right, but something still feels a little off. It's that loneliness that comes with expertise, the isolation that happens when you get really, really good at something and realize fewer and fewer people can actually see what you're doing. So over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about that loneliness, about how to find your way out of it. And today's episode, part 1, is called The Island. It's about what it feels like to be a master without a witness. And if this is your first episode, welcome. These episodes up until now are in no particular order, so feel free to jump around. And as always, you can email me at any time. Questions, thoughts, hate mail. I respond to everything, and my email is in the show notes. So a few weeks ago, I received an email from a subscriber who knows exactly what that subway station feels like. For the sake of anonymity, let's call her Sarah. And Sarah is a wedding photographer in the UK. Sarah is successful, she's booked solid, she's making great money. By any external metric, she's absolutely crushing it. But in her email, she wrote this line: "The longer I do this, the more I feel like I'm disappearing into the work, like I'm feeling less and less seen. Not dying, not quitting, not even burning out, just fading, becoming less herself with every shoot." She says that she spends 90% of her week alone in a dark spare bedroom, editing client photos in Lightroom. And the other 10%, she's performing joy and enthusiasm for people on wedding days. And people are pretty happy with the photos. They love them, actually. And the compliments keep coming. The checks, they keep clearing. But for some reason, none of it feels like enough anymore. The validation isn't validating. The success isn't satisfying. And it's like eating plain, dry toast. But everyone is telling her that she should be grateful, that you're making money doing what you love. But she told me that she can't shake the feeling that with every wedding, every edit, every forced smile and laugh for a client, she's slowly erasing her own outline, like she's becoming a ghost in her own life. And it's one of the last lines in her email. She said, quote, "I can't even talk to my partner about this anymore. She doesn't get it, and I'm tired of sounding ungrateful." Can we just pause on that word ungrateful for a second? I think gratitude has become one of the most weaponized words in the creative industry. It's used as a silencer. So if you say something like, "I'm feeling empty," the world tells you you should be grateful that you have clients. And so we tend to gaslight ourselves, right? We look at the spreadsheets that says success, and we tell ourselves that we must be broken if we don't feel successful. Now, look, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be grateful. I believe in gratitude. I think there's always a place for gratitude in life. Being thankful for the sun, being thankful for this Guinness right now that I'm drinking, for your breath, for your connection, for your family, for your life. That is healthy. That is good for us. But gratitude should never be used as a tool for self-deception. There's a massive difference between genuine gratitude and obligatory gratitude. Genuine gratitude opens you up, and obligatory gratitude shuts you up. It makes you feel indebted to your own life. And here's the truth. Gratitude really is for gifts. It's not for labor. You don't have to be grateful that the business that you build with your own sweat is working. It's a machine that you built. And because that machine is working doesn't mean you have to enjoy being the operator anymore. You're allowed to outgrow things that you used to dream about. That doesn't make you ungrateful. It just makes you human. Now, Sarah isn't talking about quitting here. I actually wrote her an email and clarified that. She's not saying that she wants to leave photography. That's not the problem. The problem is actually a little simpler, but harder at the same time. She's really, really good at what she does, and nobody around her sees it. And here's what I think is happening, and I've experienced this too. There's this thing that happens when you get deep into the craft, when you move from competent to proficient to expert, when you start operating at such a level that most people can't perceive, you become lonelier. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because the farther you climb, the fewer people can see what you're actually doing. When you're a beginner, everyone can see your progress. You couldn't focus your camera last month and now you can. There's visible improvement and everyone celebrates. When you become an intermediate, your peers can appreciate your work. They get it. They understand the challenges you have a try. But when you become more and more advanced, you're making decisions at a level that most people can't even perceive. And when that difference between good and great is invisible to the untrained eye, you become that Joshua Bell in the subway. You're playing a Stradivarius, you're playing Bach perfectly, but you're surrounded by people who can't tell the difference between you and the guy with the $300 violin playing Wonderwall. Sarah, for example, is spending 45 minutes analyzing the perfect selection for the first kiss. She carefully fixes the distracting skin fold near the armpit that most photographers would miss. She meticulously looks at each image, weeding out any that don't contribute to the perfect visual story. And nobody sees that. They see the output, the final product. They see the beautiful stories, and then they pay the invoice. But they don't see the work. They don't see the craft. They don't see the thousands of micro decisions that separate a snapshot from the art. They don't see the thousands and thousands of hours of experience that Sarah has built over time to contribute to this couple's story. And I experienced this same thing when I was working my corporate job at Taylor Guitars. Taylor is this amazing place. It's an iconic company, cool facility down in El Cajon, California. But I remember walking through the factory surrounded by these craftsmen and engineers and marketing people and feeling this weird sense of heavy isolation. So one day, the art director gave me an assignment that they were going to do a story for our internal magazine on this robot that sprays finish on guitar bodies. And Taylor's known for its really innovative and technological tooling practices. And one of those practices is a robot to spray finish on guitar bodies. And it's very advanced and innovative. It's a really cool thing to see. I had this vision in my head. I wanted to use high-speed sync on my strobes and freeze the motion of that spray mid-air. And I wanted to light it so that the background fell to complete black, complete shadow. I just wanted this light-colored white robotic arm emerging from pure black, spraying this beautiful frozen mist finish hanging in space. Every micro droplet just perfectly sharp, this beautiful industrial art. The setup was ridiculous. You know, I had 4 strobes, and I just took over this finished area. And so here I am in the spray booth wearing one of those white Tyvek painter suits, It's pretty funny. Look it up later. And I got the booties on and the hood is up and I look like I'm handling hazardous waste at Chernobyl. And my camera is wrapped in a Ziploc bag with a giant freezer bag with a cutout for the front element secured with a rubber band so the overspray doesn't destroy my $6,000 worth of gear. And I'm shooting tethered. There's this bright red USB cable snaking across the floor, running under the spray booth door to a laptop sitting in the hallway on a stand. I've got the laptop angled through a window so I could see the images coming through in the sealed booth. And it's hot in that suit. I'm sweating and my glasses keep fogging up. And I'm trying to make sure that every droplet is frozen 1/2000th, maybe 1/3000th of a second. And I'm wearing these ridiculous chemical resistant gloves that make my hand feel like clubs. And the robotic arm is on a timer. And I maybe have a 3-second window per guitar to fire the shutter at its perfect peak density. And I miss like 6 times, 7 times. The spray pattern isn't consistent. It's not perfect. It's not at its peak, and the robot jerks. The light isn't quite right. And I adjust the strobes and I try again. I adjust the angles and I try again. I'm doing all these tweaks, right? And I'm running all these calculations in my head and I'm just dialing exposure in real time. Using all my technical knowledge to make this image work, then I get it on like the 12th try. I see the image come through on my laptop screen in the hallway and it's perfect. It's beautiful. The droplets are frozen. The arm is sharp. The background is gone black. It's just perfect. The finished mist looks like liquid mercury, liquid ice, maybe frozen in space. And I was buzzing. I was so stoked. That feeling when you just get the shot, the image in your head translates into pixels on a screen. It's a beautiful moment. The electric, the full body buzz when you pull something from your brain and make it real, when you solve the puzzle, when the thing that you imagine actually exists now. I take my camera off the tripod and I stripped off the suit and I practically ran with my laptop down to my marketing department. I was so stoked and I was excited and I was ready to explain the lighting setup to the art director, the timing, the technical challenges of shooting through goddamn hazmat suit, the amount of strobes that I used. And I pulled the image up on my laptop. I turned it to the art director and he glances at the screen like I just, am annoying him from him doing his work. And he goes, "Yeah, cool shot." And he turned back to whatever he was doing. That was it. That was the entire response. "Yeah, cool shot." And as I'm about to leave the art director's office, he looked up one more time and he said, "Hey, can you give me another angle? I need another option for the magazine." Ironically, the guys in the finishing department, the guys who actually ran the spray robots, they were pretty stoked about it. They wanted to know how. They were curious. They were asking questions about how I got the light in there and how I froze the motions. They got it. They understood that it's technical and it's hard to do. But my team, right? The people who were supposed to be my creative peers, the people that I sat with in meetings every day and sat next to day in and day out, they just kind of treated it like clip art. They just another asset for the website, another Instagram post that would get a few hundred likes. And that's when I realized in that moment that I am, in fact, on an island. Everyone else at Taylor had a tribe. They lived and breathed guitars. They would interface with the product development guys, the executives, the touring artists who would stop by to spec out custom instruments. They would debate tone woods, mahogany versus rosewood, and bracing patterns and pickup windings and fretboard radius. They had a shared language, a shared obsession. And I would sit there nodding and smiling and fake enthusiasm. And I had to emotionally inflate my interest just to belong to the conversation. I had to perform curiosity about the new 1814 CE should have a Venetian cutaway or a Florentine cutaway, because I knew if I didn't, I would be even more alone than I already was. But inside, I was wildly envious. I was envious that they had a witness to their craft, that they had people who understood the nuance, the struggle, the tiny decisions that made something good versus made something great. And I didn't. I had people who said, "Cool shot," and moved on. I was Joshua Bell in that spray booth playing my absolute fucking heart out while everyone walked past to their next meeting. And this is what Sarah is experiencing, I think. She's not failing. She's not depressed. She's not even necessarily in a career crisis. She's just alone at the level that she's operating. And here's what I've learned about this specific kind of loneliness. There's actually research on this. The research breaks loneliness down into 3 types. And I think creative people, especially people like Sarah and people like me and maybe people like you, experience all 3 simultaneously. First, there's unintentional loneliness. And this is simple, right? You don't have the people around. You work from home. You're alone in your spare bedroom or in your garage or in your studio. Physical isolation. And Sarah has this. She's editing alone 90% of the week. Just her and her Mac and Lightroom and thousands of wedding photos in a dark room. And then there's deliberate loneliness. And this is where you choose to isolate because you don't want to have to explain yourself. You don't want to burden people. You're tired of sounding, quote, ungrateful. You're tired of trying to articulate the specific feeling to people who don't get it. This is Sarah not telling her partner how she really feels. This is me not telling my wife, Jamie, about the spray booth moment because I know that she would just roll her eyes and she wouldn't understand why it mattered so much. So we choose the loneliness because it feels safer than the vulnerability of not being understood. But then there's the third kind, and this is a brutal one. It's the experiential loneliness. This is the Taylor Guitars loneliness. This is the Joshua Bell loneliness. This is where you're surrounded by people, but you still feel like an outsider because nobody shares your experience and nobody speaks your language. Nobody can witness the craft. Nobody understands what you're actually doing when you're working. You're physically present, but you're psychologically absent. And Sarah has all 3. She's physically alone in that dark spare bedroom. She's deliberately not sharing her struggle because she's tired of being told that she is ungrateful. And even when she's with people, she's at the wedding, she's with her partner, she's with clients, she's with friends around a dinner table, she's still isolated because nobody can see or understand the work that she does. They see her working, but they don't see or understand the work. She's Joshua Bell in that subway playing a Stradivarius next to a garbage can. And you know what makes all of this even harder? Even with this podcast, something that I pour everything into. There's really only one person in my life who actually sees the work. Her name's Leslie. She's just a friend, lives about 2,800 miles away in Nashville, who makes her own podcast. She does this work. She knows what's involved. And I spend late nights writing these scripts. I obsess over sound design. I listen to tons of music to find the perfect bed for a specific emotional moment. I record sections 7 times because the pacing doesn't quite feel right. And no one sees that. Nobody hears that. My family knows that I'm sitting in my garage talking into a microphone, and they're supportive, obviously, but they don't understand why it takes me 40 hours to produce a 35-minute episode. But Leslie, she understands, she gets it. She hears the sound design. She notices the music. She understands why I spend 3 hours writing a single paragraph sometimes. And every once in a while, I get one of these random texts from Leslie that says that she loved the sound design of an episode or comments on a piece of writing. And I love that because someone noticed the things that only I am thinking about. She's one of the 7 people who stopped in that subway to listen to a guy playing a violin. And Sarah, the wedding photographer, doesn't have a Leslie. When I was at Taylor, I didn't have a Leslie. And that's the problem. It's not about ego. It's not about needing praise. It's about needing to be seen. So here's what actually makes it a little bit harder and more tricky. This isn't me speculating. I'm not trying to wax poetic about, how lonely we are and how much we need to be seen. There's actual research on what I'm describing. There was a study done with C-suite executives, CEOs, CFOs, people at the very top of organizations. And they found that loneliness is what they called, quote, a professional hazard of senior leadership. The research identified why. As you climb higher in your field, you experience increased social distance from your peers. There's a lack of social support for unique challenges that you are facing and exhaustion from the demands of the role. But here's the part that really sort of punched me in the face. They found that loneliness wasn't about being alone. It was about operating on a level where fewer and fewer people could understand what you're actually specifically dealing with. The higher you climb, the lonelier it gets, not because you're broken or you're weak or something's wrong, but because there are actually just simply fewer people at that altitude. And this isn't just executives. There's research on creative professionals like us too. Adobe did a research with designers and found that 60% of them feel misunderstood by their non-creative colleagues. One designer in the study said, "I spend hours crafting a design that feels perfect to me, only to have it dismissed within seconds. It's like speaking a language that no one else understands." Oh my gosh, that hits a little bit too close to home. And that's Sarah, and that's me at Taylor. That's actually me a lot of times, and maybe that's you with your craft. And the better you get, the fewer people can actually see what you're actually doing and why you're doing it. And here's what I want you to understand, and please hear me on this. This is normal. You're not crazy. You're not broken. You're not being dramatic. You're experiencing what researchers call the experiential isolation at the level of expertise. It's documented, it's studied, it's real. And Sarah is sitting alone in that dark spare bedroom in her house, feeling invisible despite her success. That's not a personal failing. That's not a weakness. That's a predictable consequence of mastery in a field where most people can't perceive the work you're doing. And the research shows that loneliness of expertise is different from other kinds of loneliness because it exists despite success, despite skill, despite doing everything quote unquote right. You've climbed the mountain, and when you look around for other people at this elevation, there's almost no one there. And the people down at base camp, They can't see you anymore. You're too far up. And that's what Sarah's experiencing. That's what I experienced at Taylor. That's perhaps what you're experiencing. And if you're listening to this and nodding your head, maybe you're experiencing it too. So if that's the problem, what's the solution? How do we fix this? Because the research is clear. The antidote to this kind of loneliness isn't, quote, more work. It's not better clients. It's witnesses. You need people who can see you in the work, not just your output, but the actual craft, and understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. You don't need applause. What you need is understanding. I've been thinking about this a lot lately and why this is so hard to find right now. And I realized that we've really lost our third space. So sociologists have this concept called the third space. So your first space is your home. Your second space is your workplace, which for most of us independent creatives, we don't even have. But that third space, that's the pub, that's the coffee shop, that's the church if you have a church, that's the barber shop, that's the neutral ground where you're not going to work and you're not going to sleep. You're just with your people. And for most of us, especially since 2020, really though, it's been disappearing since before we were born. If you're a millennial or Gen Z or younger, that third space doesn't really exist anymore. And for Sarah, her first space, her home, and her second space, her work, are really in the same building. She sleeps in the bedroom, she eats in the dining room, and she works in the spare bedroom upstairs. And there definitely isn't a pub down the street where she can hang out with other creatives or photographers. We're missing our version of Cheers, you know, that old 1980s TV show with the old theme song where everyone knows your name. We need a place where everyone knows your craft. We need a neighborhood pub for people like us, a place where you walk in and you don't have to explain why the job is hard. You don't have to explain why the client is difficult. You don't have to explain why you're exhausted. You just sit down and the people around you already know. They know what you do. They know how hard you work. And most importantly, they understand how brilliant you actually are. They see the invisible work. Joshua Bell didn't need 1,000 people on that subway to stop. He didn't need a viral moment. He needed a third space. He needed a room full of people who understand the language that he was speaking. So here's the plan. For the next 3 weeks or so, we're going to talk about how we build that. We're going to talk about how to get off these islands. We're going to talk about the costume. We're going to talk about the armor of success and the busyness that we wear to protect ourselves, but actually keeps us invisible. Then the following week, we're going to talk about the enemy. We're going to look at that visceral envy that makes us view our peers as threats instead of allies, and why that scarcity mindset keeps us lonely. And lastly, the last week, we're going to talk about that third space. We're going to look at how we actually find the people who speak our language, who know us, who understand what we do, who can be our witness, how we can stop performing for the traffic and start building a table. We aren't just going to talk about the problem. We're going to map out the way back to connection. I want to leave you with this. In research for these episodes, I stumbled across this poem by a guy named David White, and he wrote a poem called Sweet Darkness. And I've been thinking about it a lot lately as I've been doing some writing. And he has these lines I think about every time now I feel the urge to disappear. He says, quote, "You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. Give up all the other worlds except the one to which you belong." And then he says this, "Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you." So, Sarah, if you're listening, you're not broken. You're not ungrateful. You're not failing. You're just operating on a level where most people can't see what you're actually doing. The life that you've built is just too small for the artist that you have become. And that's isolating as hell. But you're not alone in being alone, if that makes sense. There are at least 7 people in every subway station who stop and listen. And we just have to find each other. So stick around. We're going to figure this out together. And if you're Joshua Bell in that subway right now, if you're doing your best work and feeling completely invisible, email me and tell me about the work that no one else sees. Tell me about that craft. I read everything. So until next week, stay curious, stay courageous, and yeah, stay terrible.